more disgraceful managing director was discovered to run off with all the money.
Right.
My dad went into panic because he'd always loved this piece of work. He'd always loved this statue. So my dad made the dash to Walsall from Lincolnshire, where we lived, wrestled her and her pillar, which is a lump of marble.
She's got a pedestal.
Yeah, she has.
Yeah.
Into the back of the cart, single-handed. Heaven knows how.
After wrestling with this woman, he must have been talking with a squeaky
Well,
voice.
no disrespect to you, Eric, but my dad was about the same size and height as yourself.
Oh, is that big?
And brought her back to Lincolnshire, and she was always dressed up at Christmas time. She had tinsel and fairy lights and earrings.
She really is a member of your family.
Is, yes. I'm the lucky one who's custodian at the moment.
I think you did well to wrestle this woman. If I wanted to go out and replace her, I can honestly see her in a very smart shop, Madison Avenue, New York, $20,000 without...
Yeah.
So what we've got here is an amazing little pen and ink drawing of a horse fair. And it's not just any old horse fair, it's Spelman's Horse Fair, which was a local fair.
It was.
In Norwich.
Yes.
And the amazing thing about this horse picture is by Sir Alfred Munnings, who became president of the Royal Academy, and he's quite possibly the most famous of all horse painters. But how did this little pen and ink come to be yours?
Well, it was left to me by my grandfather 26 years ago. It belonged to his best friend who was killed in the Second World War. And my grandfather kept in touch with his mother, and when she passed away, she left it to him, and in her turn, she left it to me.
The amazing thing for me about it is Munnings is known for his grand oil paintings and his watercolours as well. And this, to me, is a really early example of his style. And what I think this is, which makes it very rare indeed, is that when he was at art school at the Norwich School of Art, he was apprenticed to a Norwich printer. And I think this is an early illustration for that printer. And the reason why I think that is you've got this white paint. You can see it here as well. And he's essentially corrected his ink work. And so late 19th century, way before he became famous and president of the Royal Academy, you can already see that he's an incredible draftsman. You've got this cheeky chappie leaning up against the carriage. You can see the attention to detail in the horse. And then one of my favourite characters is you've got this gentleman taking a break, smoking a cigar.
Very portly looking gentleman.
So as a rare, early little sketch, even though it isn't one of his grand horse paintings, this tells us more about how good he was, because you can see all that detail. He clearly showed great promise at art school. I think this is probably worth between £1,500 to £2,000.
Gosh. Yeah, thank you.
Blazing sunshine here in Cromer. And that's exactly what we want for the Antiques Roadshow, because we can see everything with absolute precision, and nothing likes the sun better than diamonds. And look at them, they're sparkling away. Tell me about them with you.
I had an Italian godmother who was born in 1901, and she was quite grand. She was a Marchesa who lived on Lake Como in Italy.
That sounds very good, doesn't it?
And anyway, when I went to stay with her, I had to be... There was no television, there was just old people, and anyway, she left. She said, I'm going to leave you something in my will, which I was very embarrassed about. But when she left me this, how am I going to wear that, you know? And I thought I might break it up and put the diamonds in earrings or something.
Gasp of disapproval from stage left.
And I don't know anything else about it, except because she was born in 1901.
Yes.
I guess she might have had it in her jewellery box and thought, well, give that to her.
Well, I think she probably bought it new at some stage in her life, and it almost certainly dates from the 1940s. Everything about it speaks of Italian jewellery. The colour of the gold alloy, which is red. In those days, people were not coy about their status and their rank and their wealth. And so everything about her arrangements would have been up to this standard. Her motor car, her furniture, her glass. You probably remember all of this.
Yeah. She'd say a young man is coming to lunch and he'd be 45.
Yes, exactly. Well past it at 45. Hopeless. And what age were you?
I was 14.
14, yeah, that's not good. But anyway, moving on to the other jewel here.
Yeah.
I was not only pleased to see that one, but startled. Because there is an Italian connection between the two.
Okay.
This was made in Italy, worn in Italy, in the 20th century. This was made by a very famous Italian jeweller working in London He was called Carlo Giuliano, and he came from Naples and set up in London then for everything to be a reference to the past. He wanted things to look Etruscan, Minoan, Pompeian, but also he wanted things to look like the English Renaissance. So this is what's going on here. And it's an open-work gold jewel decorated with enamel. You can hardly see the gold and a little sapphire and a tiny diamond beneath it. So the temperature is rising, not only here in the sunshine, but emotionally and aesthetically, because Carlo Giuliano had a shop in Piccadilly and everybody went there. Queen Victoria bought things from him. And this one here is very late 19th century, possibly...
Late 19th century?
Yes, we know that it's between 1896 and 1914.
Gosh.
Very precise.
Wow. Well, this one was given to me by my other godmother, who's English, and she gave it to me at my christening.
Yes.
So my mother let me have it, you know, when I was a bit older.
Yes.
And, of course, I thought, well, the pendant, you know, I can't wear that. But actually, I took the chain off.
Yes.
And I wore the chain.
Yes.
And I'm afraid to say, you know, I had a shell on it, and I used to swim in the sea in it even.
The chain is based on a chain made for Henry VIII in the Holbein portrait.
Wow.
There's a reference there. It certainly isn't of that date, but that's the Renaissance reference terribly much. But about values then, come on. Any ideas?
No idea.
This one, the Italian jewel from the 20th century, I think if you wanted to buy that one now, £8,000 to £10,000.
Bloody hell.
I'd buy it again, I think. Anyway, this one here, there has been a tradition of very avid collectors, thematic collectors of the work of Giuliano. It's often very wearable, and despite the damage, I'm going to say again that you would expect to pay £7,000 for that.
Wow. But how amazing. That is incredible. How beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, to know the value of it, it's rather shocking that I treated it so badly, I think, you know. But I won't treat it so badly in the future.
You might have spotted the lifeboat station at the very end of the pier. And Cromer can boast the most decorated man in the history of the RNLI, Henry Blogg. And he helped to save 873 lives at sea in 53 years of service here at Cromer. Henry joined the crew of the Cromer line 15 years later, a position he held for 38 years. John, you're the skipper of the lifeboat here at Cromer, and there's obviously something in the genes, because you're related to Henry Blogg, aren't you?
Yeah, distantly related. He was brought up by my great-great-grandfather. He basically adopted him, really. So he was brought up in the Davis family, yes.
And he was a remarkable man, and clearly a very brave man as well.
As was all the crew in that time, you know. It was quite a unique time with the wars and everything else, and, yeah, they were very, very brave men.
He won quite a tally of medals, so let me get this right. 3 gold and 4 silver RNLI medals, a George Cross and a British Empire medal. And one of those medals involved a rescue of a Swedish boat during the First World War.
That particular rescue, they'd only just came back from another rescue, the Penrith, on the same day. Well, as they were landing, I think there was an explosion on the Furnaby, and they got the guys ashore from the original rescue, and they was asked if they thought they could get afloat again. I don't know if it was 5 or 6 times they tried to launch and got knocked back. They broke and lost a lot of oars, but they eventually got the boat to sea, and I think approximately about 1:30 in the morning that they finished the rescue. And in those conditions, you know, those men must have just been completely shattered.
And they were no spring chickens either. I mean, they aged between 50 and 70?
Yeah, because a lot of the young men had been called up for war and things like that. But that was what those guys done for a living. You know, they were all fishermen. They were used to rowing and sailing, and that was their backyard. And you wouldn't have got better blokes to go after them.
He was a very modest man, though, wasn't he?
He didn't drink, didn't swear, and didn't go very far, but he earned his living air catching crabs and lobsters.
And the most amazing fact of all to me is that he couldn't swim.
No, a lot of the fishermen in them days, you know, didn't swim, you know, and a lot of them thought, well, if you're going to go overboard, you're probably going to drown anyway, and why prolong it? But, you know, they were confident in what they were doing, and they had the best equipment at the time money could buy, as we have now.
perfect. The barometer is showing high pressure, so that must clearly mean that we're experiencing some fantastic weather.
Yeah, it's lovely.
The clock itself, apart from the barometer, it's got everything you could possibly want. It's got the time, the date, pressure, and the thermometer. And you've got this inscription.
Yes.
Now, inscriptions on clocks can be a bit of a mixed blessing, but I think with this particular inscription, it actually does add value because it's extremely interesting and also rather apt by the beach, because the inscription is for Sir James Douglas, and this was presented from Trinity House on completion of the lighthouse on Wolf Rock, which is the iconic rocks down in the Isle of Scilly and the iconic lighthouse.
Trinity House was a very important organisation at the time, and they were losing a lot of ships after they travelled halfway around the world on our shores. They were desperate to get good safety for the ships on the south coast, and there wasn't many engineers that could cope with that, but the Douglas brothers, I believe, pioneered and specialised in the rock lighthouses, and Trinity House was very thankful and awarded James, in this case, this clock.
And this actually also programmed, like a computer as it were, to accommodate for leap years.
Right.
So it will accommodate for all the long and the short months, which is quite clever for something that dates from about 1860. But it's had wear and it's had use and it's had love. So, you know, is it something that you've had all your life, or?
It's been in the family since the 40s or 50s, auntie to me.
It would have been a very expensive clock when it was made, and these sort of clocks are still really appreciated now. There are different models, but this is one of the best ones.
Cool.
And I would suggest a good pre-auction estimate. I think you could easily allow between £4,000 and £6,000.
It's the history that I love in it, so that's more important to me than anything else, yeah.
To all intents and purposes, this is a bog standard Morocco leather, gilt metal, cheroot holder, maybe cigar holder, mid-Victorian. But what makes it really interesting is these beautifully engraved brass appliques. It says Derby, 1859, a beautiful symbol of a jockey on a horse, and it says Masjid. This is connected with a very famous horse in one of the most famous races in the world.
Yeah. It's not mine, it's my brother-in-law's, and I brought it down for him today. He had a variety of occupations, but in the late 50s, he was a jockey.
Oh, I see. So where did he get this?
Well, his father gave it to him, but where his father got it from, we don't know. But we've done a little bit of research on this, and we find that John Wells, the trainer was a chap called George Manning. We are interested in finding out who actually got this.
You know, I've had lots of cheroot holders, but not one like this. This would have been commissioned, I'm sure, by the owner of that horse.
Hawley, Lord Hawley.
And he would have been so thrilled for his horse to have won such a prestigious race that I think we can almost safely say it was the trainer that owned this. But normally a cheroot holder, Morocco leather, gilt metal, 1850s, 1860s, 30, 40 pounds. With these connections and with associating it with this incredible race at this time, 600 to 700, maybe 800 pounds. Maybe in the right sale, it could even nudge 1,000.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I'm taken aback, but it won't be going anywhere.
You've brought something that isn't designed to survive.
No, it's not. It belongs to a friend. I make it today, so I thought I had to bring this up just to show you.
That is the forerunner of the original clay pigeon.
That's right.
Then later they used to put feathers inside.
Right.
But you still also had glass all over the place.
Exactly, yes.
So it was a nice idea, but didn't quite come off. So it survived from late 1800s.
Wow.
Auction in that sort of, because it's really nice condition.
It is, yeah.
£150.
Oh, 150.
There you go. You look after it now.
Thank you. Thank you.
I understand this is quite a well-travelled vase.
Yes.
What can you tell me about it?
Well, I inherited it from my grandmother 30, 40 years ago, and she'd had it forever, as far as I knew. But I've moved around a bit. Spent 20 years in California, so this went with us to California. We lived in France for 2.5 years, and it was there, and it was been in a bungalow in Wales. Now it's here in Norfolk.
Do you know where she got it from? Or?
Speculation only, because my grandmother lived in a part of South London prior to World War II, prior to 1935. And she used to frequent Brixton Market quite a lot and came back with odd knickknacks and things. And I think this is where that came from.
OK. Well, I mean, that's the sort of thing you would have expected to see in a market around then, I guess. We don't have any idea of what she paid for it back then, or...
No, my grandmother, it wasn't a lot.
Good for her. Well, it's Chinese.
That I kind of guessed, but
OK.
yeah.
And it's a porcelain vase. The variation is called famille verte. And what characterises famille verte is this very kind of vivid green here, and then these kind of polygrammatic overglazes of the wonderful iron reds and the yellows and the blues and the blacks. And when did we first start seeing this type of famille verte? Well, during the reign of Kangxi, the Emperor Kangxi, and that was in the sort of Qing dynasty, and Kangxi is 1661 to 1722. What I'm going to tell you, though, about this vase is that this was made a little bit later than that. So this one was made in the 19th century. But look, let's have a little look around this and just, you know, explore it. I mean, the one thing I did notice I was looking at, there's just one little bit of sort of rubbing and damage, but other than that, it's completely perfect. And you just got these kind of wonderful figures riding the fish at the bottom here, you know, actors going on, this wonderful coiled dragon here, and even the colours and the lustres in the trees, and it's an extraordinary piece, and so well decorated. You know, these would have been made and gone into sort of, you know, conservatories or something like that during the sort of Victorian times, and possibly on a kind of hardwood stand or something like that. Where does it live at home?
It does have a Chinese-looking table that we stand it on.
Which would have probably been acquired maybe at the same go for this. Apart from that very small piece of damage that I mentioned, you know, a little bit of rubbing that could easily be repaired in the modern world, you know, it ticks a lot of boxes, and it's a very impressive thing. If that came up for auction today, I think that that would carry a pre-sale estimate of between £3,000 to £5,000.
Well, that's great.
So they say that an army marches on its stomach, and your dad was part of that because he was a cook during the First World War.
That is correct.
What do you know about this young gentleman?
Well, he joined the army when he was 19, and served in the First World War on the front, and I presume that was when he wrote the cookbook.
Now, when he was in the First World War, he probably thought he was going to be a fighting soldier. But he gets the job of cook.
That's correct.
And it's not just a cook for one or two people, is it? It's a cook for hundreds.
That's right.
And this is the notebook that he kept that gives all of the recipes.
Yes.
And there's this wonderful one here where he's written, it's exercise number 24, which is how to carve and serve a soldier's dinner hot. Emphasised, this one is joints in a sheep. Every edible portion of a sheep may be stewed, but the following is a guide when out for issue. It's all about how to do this just for hundreds and hundreds of soldiers. Brawl, take 1 bullock's head, 1 pinch of spice, 4 cow's heads, and 1 ounce of salt. And 2 gallons of water. How many people does that make that for? I mean, you have to cook it for 5 to 6 hours. Now, soldiers are always hungry. That is something that soldiers always are, and they're very interested in food. When he came home, do you remember him as a good cook?
No, he never cooked at all. My mother was a cook. No.
So he did all that cooking for hundreds and hundreds of people,
right.
And when he came home, not as much as a piece of toast.
That's right.
OK, fair enough. Obviously, he got some medals from the First World War,
yes.
But even as a cook, he went up to the front and he was wounded.
Badly wounded. November 1916.
And there's this little piece of paper here. What does this do?
This is all the operations he had, 14. First one at Rouen Hospital. Then he ended up at Hollymoor in Birmingham, where he met my mother, who was a nurse.
He's wounded with a gunshot wound, left foot, spine is dislocated.
Yes. He could only walk with 2 sticks.
really. And there's a photo of him there, and bless him, you can actually see that this leg is quite wonky. That's even through his clothes. So what job did he do after the war?
He was a taxi driver, where he could sit down all day, and he did that to the end of his life, which was 63.
A lifetime sentence, really, though, for being wounded.
It was certainly that.
And sometimes that's what we forget about these people, that 1914 to 1918 is the war, but for the ones that came home wounded, it's a lifetime, isn't it?
When I was a boy, I remember him crying out in pain when they used to form ulcers, usually beginning of the year, January or February, and he'd be confined to bed for several weeks at a time.
Really?
With the results of the war wounds.
And then there are so many of these stories in cupboards which are fantastic and form so much of the part of the history of World War I.
That's right.
The value is priceless, really, because A, it's your dad, and B, it's one of our soldiers from the First World War. But I think if it came up on the open market, I mean, you're probably looking at somewhere around about £200, £250.
What I intend doing is giving it to a war museum.
Then we can all remember Bertie, can't we?
That's right.
I have to say, I love your car. Can you tell me about it? What is it?
It's an Austin J40.
And now, how old do you think it is?
Older than Grandad.
One year older than Grandad, is it?
Yeah, 1 year older.
Fantastic. And so, is this your car?
Yes.
Where did it come from?
They built it.
It was actually purchased online 3 years ago. Both of my uncles had them as children in the early 60s, and I thought, well, it's the ultimate boy's toy. We should have one. So, just carrying on family tradition, really.
Fantastic. OK, well, let's just talk a bit about the Austin pedal car for a moment. A lot of J40s were made, about 32,000 of them. What happened to the ones that your uncles had then?
One still survives and is a prized possession of one of my uncles, and the other one unfortunately got left under a hedge.
And rotted?
Yes.
Oh, shame, it's gone.
But many years ago.
This is, I mean, it was modelled on the Austin A40, and this is a typical Austin colour for the pedal car. Was it have you had it resprayed, or...?
It has been resprayed, but it is in its original colour.
Exactly. May I open up the bonnet?
You can indeed, yes.
A massive engine,
we
purring with power. Powered by battery, and you've got I love these 4 little spark plugs in there. So the battery would have powered the headlamp. Still working?
Unfortunately not.
OK.
And the horn...
Oh, the horn doesn't work either.
The horn is missing, unfortunately.
Difficult absolute date on it. When you bought it, what did they say?
Only that the guy that I bought it from had it as a child, and... I think that was in the mid-60s. So I don't know whether it was new when he got it.
Mid-60s is good enough for me. What did you pay?
I paid $2,000. That was 3 years ago.
They used to jog along at £1,500, £1,800, year after year after year after year. And then suddenly there's been a spike, and one fetched over £3,000 recently. So... difficult to know where to put it now, but somewhere between those two figures. But I also think that this has probably got room to grow. There is mileage in it because kids still love them.
True.
It's that time in the programme where we have a challenge set for us by our experts. It's a challenge for me and you at home. And this week we're looking at jewellery, and we need to find the imposter. And the only person who actually knows which it is Joey Hardy, our jewellery specialist. So, Joey, talk us through what you've got here and what's in this one.
OK, this is the big reveal. Ta-da!
Whoa!
Look at that.
Crikey. It's like it's come out of a crocodile mouth.
I get very excited when I see jewellery that's been made like this, which is Whitby Jet. This material is over 180 million years old. It's fossilised wood.
This is mourning jewellery from the Victorian era.
Well,
is it?
It is. A Victorian period, because of Queen Victoria was very much in mourning after Prince Albert died in 1861. They had to wear black, and she had to wear black jewellery.
And was it very expensive at the time then, Whitby Jet?
No, it wasn't so much, and that was what was nice about it. It was really inclusive. You know, everybody could afford to buy a piece of Whitby Jet.
So one of these, then, is not Whitby Jet?
That's right. One is the imposter.
Right. Come on, folks. You and your fabulous jumper there. What do you think? Which one do you think could be the fake?
Yeah, it looks a bit too shiny, a bit too polished, a bit more modern.
More modern?
Yeah.
Anyone think this one could be the imposter? You think it is, right. So you think this one. Why do you think this one?
Well, it's not as intricate and it looks quite cheap.
Cheap?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you what I think. I mean, this is so splendiferous. How could this possibly be fake? That's my view, because the workmanship is extraordinary. I love the simplicity of that.
It's got a lot of style.
It's a lot of style. You're not trying to put me off it, which is worrying me. And I think this... I'm going for this one. So a show of hands for this one being fake. We're going with this being the fake and these two being genuine Whitby Jet.
Final answer?
Is it? Yeah? Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
You are wrong.
No. Don't tell me it's that one.
No, this was carved by a young boy who was 20 years old in 1875. And as you quite rightly say, it is just superb craftsmanship. The fake is this one. You were right. You said it looks cheap. Well, it's not actually that cheap, but you're well done. So this is made of vulcanite.
What is that?
Vulcanite. So vulcanite is the sap of the Euphorbia Malaysian tree mixed with sulphur. And this was patented by Charles Goodyear, who made tyres in America. Now, I want to do something, but I want you to rub this on your hand. Can I rub it?
Yeah.
£1,000. Jet is a little gem that hasn't really something of this quality. I'd buy it.
Thanks, Jo.
Now, it's a wonderful day in Cromer, but looking at this drawing, it's not such a nice day in Spain. But before I go any further, you tell me about it.
I don't know very much about it at all. We work for a homeless hostel and the painting has just always been there. We don't know where it came from or anything.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it's a nice picture. Yeah, I like the. I know it's only sort of black and white, but it's got quite a lot of detail in it. It's quite an emotional picture, I think. We wanted to make the hostel more homely, so we wanted to put more colour pictures up. So that's why we kind of took more notice of it, because we had to take it down to sort of think about where it would go in the hostel, and that's when it kind of really caught our eye and thought there might be something in it.
The key word you used is emotional, actually, because it is quite a strong emotional subject. What we're looking at is the Peninsular War. So we're in Spain or Portugal at the beginning of the 19th century. It's part of the Napoleonic Wars, and these are British soldiers who've been in an engagement with French soldiers. And the artist you've looked up, what did you find out about him?
Only what I've read on the internet. Colour sketches, that's the only black and white one I could kind of find. And he's exhibited in lots of the museums, the Imperial War Museum being one of them.
Well, the key thing is he's a military painter. He, James Prinsep Beadle, born 1863, died 1947, so a long life. And in the Victorian period, military painting became much more animated. It was actually about what was the soldier's life like. It wasn't just glorious days and wonderful victories. It was actually about what is it like slogging along as a foot soldier. They're actually tired, they've had an engagement. There's a chap here with a bandage round his head. There's another chap there sitting down, obviously in despair.
Yeah.
Also, I suspect in this case this is an illustration for a book, because the caption gives quite a lot away. This is the officer, and he is speaking to these men. And he says, "You think because you are riflemen, you may do whatever you think proper. But I'll teach you the difference before I have done with you." Riflemen were better than ordinary foot soldiers. They're like sharpshooters, so they're a grade up.
Right.
And he's knocking them into shape as a unit. It's very much about life at the time, but clearly he went to Spain, Beadle went to the route of the Peninsular War and sketching on the ground. He's a well-known painter, artist in his field, but of course this, as you say, is a drawing. You know, it's not a magnificent painting, and therefore the value is proportionately less. What's going to happen to it next?
Well, it kind of depends what you say.
So if I say a lot of money, what happens?
Yeah. Then we will sell it and use the money. We've got, in our hostels, we've got what we call the welfare pot,
right,
which is money that people sometimes donate, and we make sure that goes directly to the residents.
Yeah.
So we do activities, days out, put on events and things for the welfare of the residents that we've got living with us.
So it's all down to me?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
If I say to you, because of what it is, the sketch and so on, the value is £500 to £1,000, you can then take it from there.
Yeah.
But is that a good value?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Sell it?
Yes.
Good.
Well, this is a riot of colour, pattern, shape, form, and it's just those wonderful sort of contextual colours of an era that's gone, because we've got everything here from, you know, the wonder of mid-century modern right through to the pop of 60s. But what ties them all together for you? What's the reason for the collection?
I love colour. In a sense, I'm a magpie. I love buying something that will inspire something for fashion, something for homeware, and it's just something I really enjoy living with and working with.
So can I ask, who have you designed for in your time?
The first person I worked with was Alexander McQueen, and after that I've worked for Bowden in the UK, Calvin Klein in New York, different companies, yeah.
And is it not unreasonable to say then that these have maybe filtered their way through in some way, shape or form?
Everything flows through from different generations to new designs.
I love that. And do you know what? I think the original designers would absolutely welcome you with open arms, because, I mean, key here, we've got a couple of key designers on the table. The first one being Peggy Angus.
Okay.
She came through with Carter & Co., which most people know in a broader sense as Poole Pottery, but certainly Carter & Co., Carter Tiles, and had this absolutely phenomenal run in the 1950s, producing the most glorious patterns, you know, all these organic forms.
Yeah.
But the one thing about Peggy is that she actually got swept aside, almost to a point where being forgotten. And that's because of the era that came after it, the 60s. And really, these tiles here, which are by Rees and Jean Powell. Rees and Jean were actually students at the Liverpool College of Art. They met there, started doing some small commissions, but they worked to create these fantastic colour block tiles.
Yeah.
And if you look at them, they are so much more that era, aren't they? We've got to look at values, and actually they're a huge area to collect. People love these things. I mean, you can buy one of these lovely Carter tiles by Peggy for upwards of, say, £15 to £25 a tile.
Yeah.
The Wade ones here, these wonderful 60s pop acid colours, well, a set of those is going to be £60 or £80.
Yeah.
So, I mean, collectively on the table, we're talking a few £100s. I sense there's a lot more at home.
Yeah, I've got some more at home, yeah.
But the thing for me in terms of value is not the value of them in financial terms here, it's the value they've added to your
career. It's what I get from it, yeah, perfectly, yeah.
And I, for one, can't wait to carry on looking at catwalks and runway shows and wait to see if I can see a piece of Peggy Angus just walking its way down the catwalk. Yeah. And if it is, I'm going to pretty much guess it's by
me.
you.
Oh, thank you.
It was my ex-mother-in-law gave me, and it had come down through her family, through I think about 4 generations. I've worn it to a fancy dress party.
You wore it to a fancy dress party? You're joking.
When I was a lot slimmer.
It's what's known as a Robalite,
Yes.
but it is a real rarity, and it is a really good quality piece. You know, I would think maybe £3,000 to £4,000.
Really, as much as that? Good gracious me.
You really made my day.
I'm glad. You've made mine too.
Used as a biscuit barrel, this is Dalton stoneware. It's just glazed on the bottom over the moulded leaves, and the central band left to a very thin glaze. I don't know if you'd spotted just on there a little initials.
No, I hadn't noticed that.
That's the signature as if one needs it, of Hannah Barlow, but you don't need to see her signature to know who made this. What do you know about it?
It was presented to my grandfather in 1935, having retired as a head gardener from a big house that he used to manage in Ipswich.
Oh, so this was his leaving present?
That's right. And it's been handed down, and when I took custody of it about 15 years ago, the first thing I noticed was that this lovely colour round here was more or less black, simply because they're both ardent smokers.
Oh, right, so we've got a bit grubby.
Yeah, so I delicately clean, but I haven't touched the top, and I'd obviously like that to become as nice as the inside.
What a difference, isn't it? That's the original plating.
Yes.
Of course, it was like that all over when it was new. What I would hate to see is that being replated. You could cover it with new electroplating, and it would look so brand new. But we've got to remember this was made in 1880 and has been used and enjoyed. It's been polished lovingly for a long time, and that's why the plating's all gone. So I would leave that alone and concentrate on, well, what is so nice, and that's the sgraffito decoration, because it shows what Hannah Barlow has drawn. She's just scratched in the figures all the way around here. There's a little girl there with a pet lamb. But because she did it so fast, it is so appealing. Made by her in 1880 and then passed down and a bit neglected later till you discovered it.
That's right.
Had it been suggested to you what it might be worth?
Well, the last time it was valued was nearly 30 years ago, and they put a figure of round about £1,000 on it.
30 years, £1,000, that was serious money. But now, has it fallen in value? I fear it has. It's not worth what it was then. Today, we're down now to perhaps 400 or 500.
Really?
I wouldn't. It's a lovely thing to have.
So we're by the sea. What more perfect thing could we have than a marine chronometer? What do you know about it?
It belonged to my father, and he was in the Merchant Navy, so I would imagine he was attracted to items that connected to sailing in the sea. But beyond that, I don't know very much about it at all.
What I love about these is they're always just beautiful. I mean, they're great quality. You've got the mahogany case with this brass banding, the lovely silver dials, the Roman numerals, and then those subsidiary second dials. And you can see the sort of gimbal action here if you unwind it, as you know, and then flick that out. You can see how at sea they can move independently, so you don't get that rocking of the sea. None of that affects it. What do you like about it?
I think it's a beautiful thing, and I wish I knew all the voyages that it was used in, really, because I love the thought that this helped steer ships across dark seas, and how terrifying it must have been for them to set sail and lose sight of the shore. Yeah. So to think that this object helped in that way is really quite special, I think.
It's been restored. Did you have that done?
I did. It was badly smashed up when I got it. The box was smashed, and the glass on the front was smashed as well.
Whoever's done it has done a pretty good job. Differing opinion. I like to see them in their original state, a little bit grimy, to show what they've been through. John Llewellyn's son, good maker. This is sort of the last bit of the 19th century, maybe the early 20th century. But it's ready to go, and they're beautiful clocks. And I think at auction, 2 to maybe 3,000.
Lovely. Thank you.
Before we hear from our next visitor, I want to let you know about a special programme we're planning. On the 3rd of September 1939, Britain declared war on Germany. To mark the 80th anniversary of the outbreak of the Second World War, we're making a programme that traces the first year of the conflict. From the home front and the evacuation to the countryside, to the Battle of the Atlantic and Dunkirk. We'll explore the lasting impact of the war through a selection of cherished possessions. If you have a story, please contact us at antiques.roadshow@bbc.co.uk. Chris, you're a lifeboatman here.
Yeah.
Just on
the end of the pier.
On the end of the pier. And you brought along what looks like an old crabbing boat.
It's an old crab boat. We think roughly, and I happened to cross this on a house clearance and just totally and utterly fell in love with it. It's actually gone into a museum, the Wooden Boat Rescue, which is over at Stiffkey, which restores boats of this character.
Well, it's a lovely thing, isn't it? I noticed that this is how it looks on one side.
Yeah. Basically, what happened?
This is how it looks on the other.
This was how I found it, and then I just happened to get my thumbnail and scratch the paint off, and it was just, I was like, whatever's going on here? Then turned it around, and just you can see what I found underneath the first coat of paint. I knew I'd found something good, and we think this could have been made as an apprentice piece, or another piece could have been just an advertising thing, because obviously in those days they didn't have the leaflets, they didn't have the internet to advertise their product.
And it's got a little...
There's a little whelk pot in the bottom, roughly about the same period, we guess.
Which is just charming,
it's just beautiful.
Isn't it?
Just absolutely beautiful, everything about it.
And do you go crabbing yourself?
Yeah, of course, with my daughter off the pier.
Well, I was talking to Hilary Kay, about a value for this. I mean, I know it's emotional value is very powerful for you. I mean, £300 or so, possibly.
I've been offered that, and it's just not a chance. No way I'd sell it. Being on the boats, being in the water, surfing, it's just everything. It's just lovely.
What it is it's whale tooth. So
Right.
this is sperm whale tooth, and it's called scrimshaw. We've got a clipper, we've got a lighthouse, we've got the sea.
Yep.
Everything we need. What's its story? I mean...
Well, unfortunately, I don't know much of its story. I had it from my uncle. He lived at Stamford. Our family have kept stuff over the centuries, and every so often my uncle would want to get rid of something because he knew he'd have to move eventually. And he'd say, oh, go on, just take this, go on. And this was something that he handed over to me.
How long ago? Or?
I should think it must have been in the 1980s. I did have a great-grandfather who was in the Navy in the middle to late 1800s, so whether it could have been something that he picked up.
Well, that could well be the connection. This one does date from maybe the mid-part of the 19th century, something like that.
Okay.
You know, and I look at that, and the carver, for me, got it absolutely right.
Yes, it's very finely done, isn't it?
It is, and it's just such a sort of tactile thing, you know. You pick it up, and actually you can see there that actually it's got this sort of lovely sort of sympathetic wear and this lovely sort of colour and patina to the tooth itself. This would be very desirable, I think, if it came up at auction today. There'd be a lot of people who would want to own it, and I think if that came up for auction today, £1,500.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing, isn't it, for a little object like that? It's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Very occasionally we meet an owner who's just a little...
Find anything in a box that you can find anything better than a small army gold. What are we going to value it at? Well, do you know, I think it's got to be £40,000. It's just stunning.
Ellis Lowry, the composer of Matchstick Men, that much-loved artist of the 20th century. But also he's an artist who has been bedevilled by fakery. Now, where did you get your...
Glasgow about 25 years ago, and I think the auction catalogue said believed to be by Lowry. I was interested in it, but I didn't leave a bid, and I couldn't be there for the auction. But the picture expert actually rang my employers, he knew where I worked, and got my home phone number and said, I really think you should leave a bid for it. And so I thought, I'll leave a bid for £110 and see if I get it or not, and I bought it.
I have to tell you, on the Antiques Roadshow, we probably see more fake Lowrys than any other artist.
Really?
And it has to do with his popularity.
Yeah.
And it also has to do with the simplicity of the form of many of his figures. A lot of people feel that they can just take it on. You know, they can take out a brush, take out a pencil, and do one of these figures. Although, actually, in reality, they're a lot more sophisticated than you imagine. Now, there's quite a lot going on in this picture, and I've been eyeing it from this angle that I do find rather convincing. I mean, take that little dog, for example. Lowry is marvellous when it comes to little animals. He manages to capture their curiosity and their energy, the essence of their body shape. Look at that figure there, for example, again, walking away. One of the things that we look for, preoccupied, and even in that tiny form, you can get that sense that these are people with things on their mind.
Yes.
Look at this foreground figure here, this guy with what looks like a newspaper under his arm and a fag in his mouth, walking from left to right, creating a sort of dynamic in the picture. So we're talking about really quite a sophisticated drawing, and if it's not by Lowry, it's by someone who's done his homework. It's a town square, most of it.
Well, it's on the cover of what looks like a sketchbook cover or something, and on the back it just says Pip's Orchestra, and this figure here seems to be looking as if he's conducting something or playing to a crowd. But I did find in an old book on Lowry, I found painting that this seems to be a preliminary sketch for.
Yeah, because he brought an image of the picture for which it might be a preliminary sketch. Street scene, 1950, by the artist himself. And actually, it's really interesting because it appears wherever there's a cross on the picture is a figure in the oil painting. And you can also see how the main focus of the activity, if they were crosses, which is a conductor in the middle. So the big question is this a copy, or is this a genuine preparatory work for this very important oil painting? If this can be proved to be, by Lowry, a preparatory work for a famous painting, it's worth about £10,000.
Gosh.
If it's not, well, £110 is perhaps not that much.
No,
in the big scheme of things.
It's provided huge enjoyment in the interim.
A rich mystery in your life, which with any luck you'll be able to solve. Will you let us know if you succeed?
I certainly will.
In proving it, we'd be most interested.
Thank you.
At first sight, this looks a bit plain, a bit dull even. But before we talk about it, do you know any of its history, or how did it come into your possession?
Not that much. It was given to my parents by an elderly lady they used to look after. Dad did her gardening, Mother did odd jobs. From what I understand, the lady was a Murray with a tartan and was born in Blair Castle itself. That's all I know. So whether it's been in her family, I have no idea.
Good heavens.
It's a pretty unusual gift.
I was just going to say, I
yes,
mean...
and probably all those years ago, things weren't collectible then, were they?
I think that's possibly the key to this whole subject.
Yeah.
If we turn it round, we can get an idea that this coat of arms immediately tells me the sort of period this piece was made. Do you know how old it is?
I don't. I know nothing about it.
Absolutely nothing?
No. Not even the marks.
Well, this sort of plumed decoration either side of the armorials is classic Charles II.
Really?
So we're talking of the 17th century.
Gosh.
If we get back again, it's got 4 fabulous marks. I mean, they look like they were stamped on last week. But the main thing to tell you is the date letter here is for 1666.
No.
Now, what happened in 1666? The Great Fire of London.
No, really?
This was made in London in the same year. We've got the maker's mark, RS, which is for Richard Stonehill. And what have we got? We've got a communion cup made in that fateful year. It's actually not a bad one. I mean, where do you keep it at home? Is it on the mantelpiece or
no,
what?
it's on top of my Jacobean wine cupboard in my sitting room.
Oh, that's not a bad piece of furniture for it to sit on.
Absolutely.
I should mention that this has nothing to do with it whatsoever.
I did think so, but...
It's got a huge lump of lead round
yes.
it. It is, of course, the pattern, which originally should sit on top like that.
Yes.
But it doesn't actually belong to it, because this is dated 1708.
Oh, right.
So it's much later.
Why is it so indented inside?
That's the original hammering, which the original silversmith hammered the piece up from a flat sheet. That's why it's so amazing that you've got all that hammering there. Normally you don't see that. It's polished away, rubbed away. But it's like the day it was made. It's outstanding.
Gosh.
If I tell you it's worth a little bit, is it still going to stay on the Jacobean?
Absolutely.
So what if I tell you it's worth £10,000?
Really? How much is that? You're joking.
No, I'm not.
Really?
It really is
Gosh,
worth £10,000.
I need a seat. I never thought that much, honestly, right, but crikey.
It is absolutely superb. And I can't tell you what a pleasure it is for somebody like me who looks at silver day in, day out to see such a great object.
Thank you. That's made me very pleased.
Do you remember earlier on in the programme we were hearing about Henry Blogg, the most decorated lifeboatman in the history of the RNLI, who served here at Cromer? Well, I wondered if anything else might turn up associated with him. And sure enough, one of our visitors had brought along this little sampler. And the name at the bottom is Ellen Blogg. And she did this in 1869, and she was Henry's mum. And from her, 8 generations down served on the lifeboat here. As we end the roadshow on the pier, it's great to commemorate the extraordinary work of the lifeboat here at Cromer. From all of us on the